policy-wise. It wants to do something like this, with whatever the policy reasons are. Number one, it's here. Number two, potentially trying to move it out of the neighborhoods and into a commercial district, so it can be more heavily regulated. Now, again, I was told to come here for the meeting to kind of make the introduction, because I know all of you have not had a lot of time to look at the ordinance, study the issue, and I'm just here to present it initially, but discuss, answer any questions that you may have regarding medical marijuana, the Facilities Act, residential use, all of those things. Now, one more thing just to talk about the Facilities Act is that although the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act was passed over a year ago in the fall, it did not become effective until December this year. And the reason why it did not become effective until December of this year is because there was another law passed with this to create a computerized database infrastructure for the medical marijuana industry. And the state is going to have what's called a seed-to-sale tracking of all medical marijuana. So that's how heavily regulated this is going to be. The seeds are going to be tracked from the grower to the processor to the dispensary to the final end product. And so they could not authorize these types of facilities without that already being in place. My understanding is that it is already in place. And so starting with December 15th of last year, the state of Michigan started accepting applications for a state license, because the mechanism for doing business in the state of Michigan under this new law is that you have a municipality that licenses or permits one or more of these types of facilities. And once they have preliminary approval that way, then they must go to the state of Michigan, to the State Medical Marijuana Commission, to get approved. And there are very strict guidelines. It's a pretty detailed act about who can and can't be a medical marijuana facility owner, whether felony convictions involving drugs, all of those things. Now, what we've done with this ordinance is we've taken a lot of the background check and the requirements and put it into this ordinance as well, because if the city of Taylor wants to go down this road, we also want to make sure that we're regulating what we want, evaluating what we want, looking at who we want in the city, looking at who they are, what their plans are, all of those things. Because ultimately, even though the state is going to be issuing a state license, we all know it's going to be up to local regulation to make sure they're compliant with our ordinance and the state law. And when we have a local ordinance, because we can be involved locally here with our district court and with me as prosecutor, I feel like we get a lot more done, a lot more quickly than going to the state prosecutors, things like that. So you have that in front of you right now. That's the general mechanism that's set up. And if you have any questions today, I can answer them. Go ahead.
Just you said about the locations that, when you mentioned a lot of homes appearing at a certain house, a lot of cars and stuff, that they go in there and we find out they're selling marijuana out there, but it's legalized.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is there anything with it we could put in an ordinance that when they're doing that they must post that somewhere on their home windows or something, so that people know it, the officers are going to know it, and plus it's going to be hopefully in our system where these places are. But is there anything that says that we can't make them post?
Or apply for a permit?
Yeah.
All right.
To keep a permit on it? That's good.
Right now, at the beginning of this ordinance in the residential area, this draft has, if you are growing medical marijuana and you are a caregiver, to register with the city and get a permit and get inspections for what's going on. Because the biggest issue that we have are, electricity, water, all the things that go into those things, even more so than whether or not it's next to your house. There are some building and safety issues with regard to growing here, and also how much, okay? Now, I will tell you that this ordinance, with regard to the residential area at the beginning, is pretty aggressive, all right? It's pretty aggressive because the Medical Marijuana Act provides a lot of rights. It's like the Constitution of medical marijuana. So, as far as posting a sign or posting something in your window that you are a medical marijuana caregiver, okay, the answer is probably not, okay? Now, the law says, and the case law says, that we are able to impose zoning regulations with respect to individuals that have medical marijuana. But once we start to get down the road of sometimes identifying, I mean, for example, the records for the caregivers or patients are not FOIable, they're exempt, you know, because they treat it like a medical record almost. So that probably is not something that would be permitted, you know, as far as like a sign.
Would that also be considered a business?
As far as a home occupation, sure.
Now, do they have to register, would they have to register with our city as a business?
Potentially, except for the Medical Marijuana Act, one of the big holes or issues that it has is that it says that I can be a caregiver and you can be my patient, okay? But it doesn't tell me how to get you it, and it doesn't tell me if you're gonna pay for it, and it doesn't tell me if I have to do the transaction in my house, or can we do it in a car, or can we meet at the mall, okay? So you're raising legitimate issues about whether in fact this is, because what if the people say it's not a home occupation? I'm a caregiver, I'm allowed to have patients, it's not a home occupation, it's none of your business whether they give me money or not.
What
You know,
I'm
type of
thinking,
thing.
yeah, what I'm thinking about is the officers on the street, like, these people are out exchanging this stuff. What's happening when the officers pull up and all of a sudden these people are handcuffed,
Well-
banged up against a car and put in the car and everything? Then you find out. Because as far as I'm concerned, I see somebody exchanging dope on the street, the first thing's gonna happen, their hands are gonna be put somewhere where they're not gonna
Right.
do it. Because you're thinking what? You got
Or
dope
is this
dealers.
gonna be an ordinance officer issue where they're gonna be writing tickets for home caregivers that aren't registered?
It potentially
anyone
could be an
working.
ordinance issue, but the primary issue that we're dealing with is usually with the police with regard to marijuana, all right? Because the ordinance officers don't have the authority to arrest somebody who's possessing marijuana, police officers do. And what generally happens now is that I find with most of the reports that I read, most of the police officers either ask if the people have a medical marijuana card, or the people immediately volunteer that they do. And so, you know, while there may be you know, some handcuffs placed, I mean, once it's less than 2.5 ounces of marijuana, or they've only got 3 plants in their trunk, and they're not smoking in public, because we can prohibit consumption in a public area. But once they're not doing that, you gotta be, it's either gonna be let go at that point in time or dismissed at some point.
Now, will our ordinance be just considered is basically like a misdemeanor?
Yeah, we have it written as.
Will we dictate, are we having to use, we're gonna dictate our own law as far as fines and punishment?
I mean, we're limited by the state law as a
Right.
city for up to $500 fine
Yeah.
and up to 90 days in jail for misdemeanors, all misdemeanors.
Now, what's gonna constitute if they've gone past that amounts they're supposed to be growing? Does it become a a state case then?
It can be, but, you know, if we're talking about a medical marijuana user that is supposed to have 2.5 ounces in his pocket, or pockets, I'm not sure
Right.
how long, you know, and he's got 3.5 ounces, so he's violated it. I mean, it's probably, that would probably be an ordinance violation. We would probably do it. I think a lot of times, unless it's bigger stuff, I mean, going downtown, they don't care too much. I mean, one of the benefits of, you know, us keeping it local is that we're all here together and we care.
Does that give us the right to inspect at any time?
With regard to a house, no. With regard to a facility, yes.
Okay.
In fact, the state law provides that it can be, you know, it's subject to inspection.
So we can't stop a facility, a house, we can't
Caregiver.
stop their caregiver. We can't stop them growing in their house at all. We
Um,
can we permit it? Can we say, you know, you gotta pay a $500 permit fee and electrical inspection, because we know we need a little bit of electric.
Mhm.
We can't do any of that.
The ordinance that you have in front of you right now is pretty aggressive on that, and make sure that if you are a caregiver, you're limited to a certain amount of plants, and you have to register with the city as a caregiver.
Now, it says-
However, I
it
will
says
tell you-
License and fees, what's the fees?
Okay, is that with the commercial thing? Because licenses and fees, what the state law provides is that a municipality can charge up to $5,000 annually per medical marijuana license. And the way most of these, and the way this ordinance is set up, and the way most of them are set up, is that there is an application fee, like $1,000 application review fee. So the person has a non-refundable $1,000 application review fee, as long as it's reviewed. Again, we put in there, if somebody submits $1,000 in application and there are no licenses available, they get their money back. But if they fail so the $1,000 would then be credited against, if they are granted a license, the $5,000 annual fee that they would have to pay on an annual
Well, it's
basis.
just the facilities that.
That would be for
not
facilities.
homes.